Boston College players in the NFL, well, a bunch of them just took the first steps and they're looking good.
You are Locked On Boston College, your daily podcast on the Boston College Eagles. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. This is Locked On Boston College, your team every day. I'm your host, AJ Black. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Super Bowl 59 is here, and there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. New customers can bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get yourself started. On today's show, we're going to talk about basketball's insane comeback against Florida State, hockey downing UMass Lowell in convincing fashion, but we're going to talk a lot about the Shrine Bowl and Senior Bowl, which saw a handful of Boston College players performing. And to talk about that, we have Mitchell Wolfe of Eagle Insider joining us today. Mitch, it's been a little while, but how you doing?
Doing well. Excited to talk about this. It's one of my favorite times of the year is checking out these college all-star games, and makes it even better when we've got a lot of BC players in them to talk about.
Yeah, so let's kick this off. Do you want to do Shrine Bowl first or Senior Bowl?
We'll do Senior Bowl as that's what it has up on the graphic.
All right, well, yeah, we'll go in order. So Donovan Ezeiruaku and Ozzy Trapilo both were in the Senior Bowl. Talk a little bit about, these are two guys that are looking at being, either first, anywhere from the first or third to fourth round. How did they perform? Did they hurt or help their stock? Where are they at right now, Mitch?
I think that both of them, I think Ezeiruaku probably helped more than anything. I think Trapilo probably, I would say, stayed stagnant. I think it's hard for some offensive linemen, to really succeed at events like this because first of all, they do a lot of more work in pass pro than run blocking. So you don't have an opportunity to run over people as much. And when they do the one-on-ones, when they do the one-on-one reps, the defenders have all the advantages in the world. They can pull all these moves and they have more time. They don't have to worry about it being a screen or anything. As if it was a real play, they can just go and try whatever. And, it can take them 5 seconds, but they can technically, when you watch, they won the rep, but it took them 5 seconds to get past the offensive tackle. So, but even in the team stuff, I thought Trapilo had some ups and downs. But for a player like him who, a lot of his success comes from tape study and preparation for certain opponents. When you can't really do that in a condensed time frame, you're not going to have as much success. The offense that they run in the game also is kind of limited. There wasn't a ton of diversity in the run game, so he doesn't have a lot to go on. So that can be forgiven. I think him coming in at 6'7" and change and 321 pounds was good. His arms came in a little shorter than I expected at a little over 33 inches, which for a guy who's almost 6'8", you kind of think they're going to have longer arms than the 34. He had 33.5-inch arms. And for guys who are 6'7", 6'8", you think they're going to have arms that are 34, 35 inches. So that was a little disappointing. And you can kind of see that show up when he has to go against players like Mike Green, who is an edge rusher from Marshall, who's getting a lot of publicity. We'll talk about him a little later as well. A guy like that who has a lot of speed and burst off the edge can give Trapilo some trouble because he doesn't have necessarily the best athleticism to be able to get out of a stance and cut him off. And then not having as long of arms as you would like, that he can't make as much contact. Trapilo does a really good job of getting guys around the arc and past the quarterback enough. He's pretty good at doing that. So that's encouraging. And I think he got better as the week went on. And in the game, even though he only played 2 drives, which was crazy, and he had 15 snaps, which the other 2 right tackles got 3 or 4 drives each, which I thought was kind of weird. So, but he got better in the game in his second drive. So that was good to see. So I think he generally was okay. I think a good combine will help him. And I still think he's kind of a sleeper offensive tackle. There's this kind of tier of guys are at the top. Your Will Campbell from LSU, Josh Connolly from Oregon, Armand Bamboo from Missouri, Kelvin Banks from Texas. Those guys are kind of the top tier. And then in the second tier guys, it's a little more jumbled. So he could still, help himself with some good interviews. I assume that'll happen.
All right. So that's your tackle, Ozzy Trapilo, who, I think a lot of folks are thinking will be the highest draft pick for BC, at least on the offensive line, because there's going to be 3 guys we're looking at. We're looking at Drew Kendall, and we're also looking at Jack Conley, who we'll talk about in the second segment. Now, the player I think a lot of folks are watching, and I thought did a really nice job of with interviews and everything was Donovan Ezeiruaku. This is a guy. I mean, after the season, you don't tell a BC fan, you know, this guy's something special. But he, again, as you mentioned, when you're doing defensive drills, he's going to have big performance. He didn't do all of the practices, correct? He sat out after 3.
2 days. So
2 days.
after the second day, I'm pretty sure because
Okay.
Mike Green, who I mentioned earlier from Marshall, he left after 2 days, and so did Shamar Stewart from Texas A&M. They both left after 2 days. I thought Donovan left after 2 as well because when I looked at the practices again, on the third day he wasn't there. So which kind of surprised me because watching his practice reps, I thought they were mostly good. I thought that he could have helped himself by staying another day and obviously I think participate in the game. Naturally, that comes with the risk of having an injury or having a bad day, which I don't think is necessarily the worst thing. So I was a little surprised he left after, Green and Stewart, they had some really big highlight worthy plays. So Green had this play where he bull rushed the Oregon tackle Josh Connerly and just put him on his butt, and that was like the biggest highlight play coming out of the Senior Bowl during the practices. And then the next one was by Shamar Stewart, the edge rusher from Texas A&M, who I love. He's 6'5", 280, and he's insane. I sent you some clips from him a little
Yeah,
while.
he's crazy.
Like he's like an alien built in a lab. He's crazy. But he had this one play where he won around the edge and like just popped the ball out of the quarterback's hands from behind, which was awesome. So they let and he had another play where somebody asked him like his favorite rep from the day, and he said, "Oh, with the one I went against is 52 or whatever." And I said to him, "I'm going to run through your face," and then I ran through his face. so he's kind of funny, and he had some really good reps. So they were dominant, had these big plays. It's like, all right, I get it. Ezeiruaku had some plays where I was like, okay, like I would like to see more. In the run defense for him, it's not just not as much of his strong suit when you're playing against bigger, better players. Um, and that's because he's 6'2", he's 250, he's under 250 pounds is just naturally how it's going to be. He does have longer arms, 34 and 34 and a half inch arms for him, which is very long for somebody of his height. And he knows how to use them well. And the thing I say about Ezra, I heard somebody else say this similarly, so I'm kind of stealing it. But when you watch Ezeiruaku, he knows that he can't just crash into the offensive tackle or the tight end on every play and just hope that he can set the edge. He knows that's not going to work. So he does a very good job of knowing how to duck under, dodge tackles and everything, dodge blocks and get around guys, not just take them on physically because he knows he's not going to win that as much.
Right.
Part of that, and this is kind of similar to Pillow in that a lot of how he wins is by studying opponents and knowing their tendencies, knowing their tells, and then anticipating what they're going to do, and then basically blowing it up by being a step faster because they don't expect the defense to know what they're doing. And you see this a lot on his tape from the 2024 season. And again, for him, I think on the second day he was better in run defense. In the one-on-one pass rush drills, he was pretty good. He had one play where he tried to do the inside spin move and just got swallowed up, and that happens. That sometimes pull a move, it doesn't work, but had some other really good reps, had a really clean win against West Virginia's Wyatt Milam, had another one where he beat Marcus Mbow from Purdue, and after he kind of got by him, Mbow gave him a bit of a shove from behind, and then Ezeiruaku turned around and shoved him right back, so they got into a bit of a fight during practice, which generally happens in these, guys get into little tiffs. But from what I understand, from what I was learned listening to other podcasts and shows talk about this of people who were there, guys from PFF, Todd McShay's show, a handful of others. A lot of Ezeiruaku's had some big moments as like a leader and being a very vocal player at these practices. And I can't exactly remember the situation, but somebody was talking about this situation where they were doing a rep, or they said, "Oh, this is the last rep," and then they said, "Okay, that's gonna be it." And he says, "No, sir, we're doing it again. We're doing it again." So he's kind of showing that leadership again.
Yep.
And after that Mike Green play where he dumps Josh Connerly on his butt, Ezeiruaku is chasing after Green, who's celebrating, like trying to celebrate with him because they're so excited for each other. So that was cool to see.
Yep.
I think generally Ezeiruaku helped himself. I am a little interested to see what his athletics testing is at the combine, because that's never necessarily been like his best thing. He's a good athlete, not a great athlete, and you kind of hope he has better numbers for a guy that's smaller. But I think he helped himself. I think that the buzz coming out of the Senior Bowl, from what I've read, from insiders, from everything, seems to be going pretty positive. It's just a matter of like guys like Green and Stewart were so explosive that he kind of was the quote under the radar guy. But I think we're trending towards Donovan Ezeiruaku being a pretty possible, maybe even likely first round pick.
Oh wow, okay. And I saw he sent me an article that had Bill O'Brien stumping for him,
Mm-hmm.
and one guy that he compared him to was Whitney Merciless, who he coached with the Houston Texans. Do you think that's a good comp? Or
I thought that was a very interesting comp because if I remember, I'm going to look it up now because if I remember Whitney Merciless correctly, he's a much okay. So he's listed at 6'4", 258. So, and his
two
okay, so
inches
his
taller,
combine
right?
measurables were 6'3", 5'8", 261 pounds, 33 and 7/8 inch arms. So a good bit bigger, but I would have to go back and watch some tape of Merciless because that is an interesting comp. It might just be O'Brien going back to a guy that he knows well. So I'm still worried on finding a comp for Ezeiruaku because it is given his size, but and what he does well. It is hard to find a really accurate comparison for him because there's a lot of guys that are that size. Like, oh, they're super athletic speed guys off the edge, and that's not really Ezeiruaku. So, and then there are other guys like that where they don't really have the the dynamic arsenal of pass rush moves that Ezeiruaku does. That's a pretty rare skill set. So it's kind of hard to find a guy that has that kind of skill.
He's going to end up in Green Bay, isn't he?
No, because I honestly don't think so. Because I don't think he's a fit for what Halfley wants to do. Halfley wants bigger, longer defense. I mean, Ezeiruaku is long, but he wants like big defensive ends, not guys who are sub 250.
All right. In a moment, Mitch and I are going to talk about the Shrine Bowl. The East West Shrine Bowl had Jack Conley, Drew Kendall, and Cam
Cam
Horsley.
Horsley.
I always forget Cam. And we're going to talk about how they did, and if they helped or hurt their stock. We'll talk about that in just a moment. Super Bowl 59 is here. One game, two teams, endless possibilities. And there's no better way to make every play more exciting than with FanDuel Sportsbook. Whether it's predicting the first touchdown, calling the MVP, or betting on the coin toss, FanDuel makes it easy to get in on the action. With live betting all game long, you can adjust your bets as the game unfolds and feel the thrill from the final whistle to kickoff to final whistle. The live betting feature lets you stay involved no matter what. So if you want to go for some anytime touchdowns or put together an in-game parlay, you can do all that on FanDuel. And plus, knowing that you can place a $5 bet and potentially win $200 in bonus bets for the Super Bowl, that's icing on the cake. Download the app or head to FanDuel.com to get yourself started. Bet just $5, and if you win, you'll score $200 in bonus bets. It's FanDuel.com. Bet with FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of Super Bowl 59. This is Locked On Boston College. AJ Black here. Thank you all for joining us. And when you're done with this episode, I have a second listen for you. Well, first of all, if you haven't listened to last week's episodes, they're all kind of evergreen. I'm talking a lot about recruiting, end of the season kind of stuff. Go back and check out all those. But also check out Locked On Celtics. The Celtics just came back in from 26 points down to win by 8 against the 76ers today. Check out that on YouTube or Locked On Celtics, wherever you get your podcast. Now, Mitch, the Shrine Bowl, that's all in the books as well. We saw Jack Conley, Cam Horsley, and Drew Kendall in that. Well, let's talk about the three of them. How did they look?
So unfortunately, I was not able to get practice film from this game. I was able to watch the game and read some reports about practice. And from practice, I would say that Cam Horsley and Drew Kendall were pretty solid in practice. I saw their names on multiple articles from people, looked up some stuff from people that I trust in the space, and they both mentioned them as guys who had pretty solid weeks, not necessarily dominant, but they were representing themselves well, making some good plays. Kendall played some guard apparently, which he has never really done. He was a center only at BC. He was up to 303 pounds, which is great because I'm pretty sure coming to college, he was like 260. So, him getting up to a better weight that ostensibly means he's getting more physically strong is great. Horsley, I think, was 6'2", 307, if I remember correctly. And I imagine that's down a bit of weight for him, and I'll explain why in a minute. Because when they went to the game, Horsley looks like a completely different player. He was extremely explosive and fast off the ball. Looked a lot more like the 2021, maybe 2022 version of himself. He was shooting gaps. I will say, I think he had a tell on the Oregon State center's snap count or something because there were plays where he was just jumping the snap perfectly. And I know that guy, Joshua Gray, was a tackle in college, so he was converting to center. So maybe he had something that was giving it away because he hasn't played the position that much. Because he had a beat on that snap count sometimes. But still, he got some pressure. He had one play where he probably should have had a sack, but the quarterback, North Dakota State's Cam Miller, who's a pretty good runner, was able to throw it away at the last second. And he had some good run stops. He was bench pressing the center back into the backfield like he usually does, showing some good pursuit from the backside where he was, again, looking really fast, which was cool to see. So for him, I think it's going to be interesting because he, again, has played this nose tackle position exceptionally well the last few years. the downside of that is that he hasn't had much pass rush production. But if he is playing at a lighter weight, it can still be that good in run defense. It can add back some of that pass rushing capability. I think he could be a very effective late round sleeper and kind of a gem in the later rounds where a team can get this guy just to draft him as a nose tackle, and then he might surprise them as a bit of a pass rusher. Going back to the offensive lineman, in the game, I thought Kendall was a bit worse than what I read in practices. To be fair, he was going up against some very good nose tackles. The Nash Hutmacher, who we talked about from Nebraska in the bowl game, who was like a 4-time state wrestling champion in Nebraska, which that means something. The other one was Nazir Stackhouse, who's Georgia's nose tackle, who's like 6'3", 320. And JJ Pegues, he transferred to Ole Miss this year. The past few years, he was at Auburn, and he was there at both Auburn and Ole Miss. He was their jumbo Wildcat quarterback because he had played quarterback or tight end in high school, and he's just an insane athlete at 320 pounds. So all these dudes who like outweigh Kendall by 10, 15, 20 pounds, he was having some trouble in the run game, getting some movement. There was one play where Stackhouse just threw him aside. Wasn't a very good rep, but he was pretty solid in pass protection. It's funny with these all-star events because it's hard to find centers, so they usually try to cross-train guys. And you could tell that Kendall was just the most comfortable snapping, just always very on target with where the ball needed to be. And he was playing next to Jack Conley for all but one of their drives. There was a drive at the end of the game where Conley was just on the field, but so they were together a lot, and you could tell they had chemistry with their double teams, passing off stunts. They were playing well together. So again, the center class is pretty weak. It's going to get supplemented by guys transitioning to that position. The big one is Gray Zabel out of North Dakota State at the Senior Bowl, who was a college tackle, but he was if you read anything about the Senior Bowl, it's going to mention Gray Zabel because he moved inside and was very good at center. So he might be the top quote unquote center taken. So Kendall, I think, is probably going to be a day 3 pick just because I think there are those concerns about his play strength, which limits him more to maybe more zone style schemes where he can be more of an athlete. So that brings us to Jack Conley. And
we're going to be nice to Jack Conley on this episode.
This isn't quite to say something nice about Jack Conley to reference the basketball team, but watching the game, and again, when I looked at Jack Conley, I couldn't really find much about any practice reports involving him. So watching the game, it was kind of the same Jack Conley game that we see all the time. He's pretty good in the run game, has some nice double teams, gets some movement on some pull blocks, and pass protection was a bit of a nightmare. He allowed 2 pressures. He allowed one of them was a sack where he basically tried to stick his one arm out to stop the defensive lineman, and the defensive lineman just kind of picked it up and went under it and went through for a sack. And that was Tonka Hemingway from South Carolina, one of my favorite names in this draft.
That's a great
honestly one of my
name.
favorite names of all time. And then he had another one where he got long-armed back into the quarterback for a pressure. So, I think Conley has made a lot of strides as a player since I started appearing on this podcast and talking about him, and was probably not as nice, or I was probably more rude than I should have been, but I just simply don't see an NFL player. I think he is a major liability in pass protection, mostly because of his hand usage. And the reason why is because his hands and feet are too linked, where he's going to step forward and strike at the same time. And that allows defenders to defeat his hand strikes and get around him. So you see that a lot. And also, for how big he is, he doesn't really show as much strength and power as one would hope. And, guys who are just more athletic than him could beat him. And frankly, in the NFL, he's going to face a lot of guys that are more athletic than him. So that's going to be a problem. So again, and this is the thing I said to you, if guys like Tyler Vrabel, Ben Petrula, Alec Lindstrom, who were pretty good to very good college players, haven't really been able to get out of the preseason or off the practice squad in the NFL, I really find it hard to see a path for Jack Conley, who, not trying to be mean, I'm saying he has been a lesser college player than those guys. It's hard for me to see him becoming a successful NFL player, more so than they have been.
Right. So it's going to be a tougher path. And now after this, we have the combine, and it looks like it's going to be a Ozzy Trapilo and Donovan Ezeiruaku experience only, probably.
I could see Kendall and Horsley getting invites. I think they've impressed enough. They impressed enough at these games. I think Bill O'Brien has his contacts, and I think that especially Kendall, because it's such a thin center class, they're going to want centers there to see what they can do. Horsley, maybe a toss up because it is an exceptionally deep defensive tackle class, so there might just not be enough spots. So I feel very confident about Ezeiruaku and Trapilo. I think Kendall, I feel pretty good about that one. Horsley, I think he should, but it wouldn't shock me if he wasn't.
All right. Well, that's going to wrap up our discussion on the bowl games. And I know this is a favorite part of the year for you, but where can people find more about your discussion on this?
So you can find me at Mitchell T. Wolfe, WOLFE on Twitter. My stuff is going to be posted on Eagle Insider. I'm going to have a recap of all of these games, along with clips from the games, from the Senior Bowl practices, so you can kind of see what I'm talking about with actual video evidence. And then as we get close to the draft, I'm going to start putting together some positional rankings. So putting the BC guys in terms of showing how they are relative to the rest of the class at their respective positions. So I'll probably get them for Ezeiruaku, Trapilo, Kendall. Horsley might not have enough time because, again, there's so many good defensive tackles that'll be hard to rank them all in time. But we'll have that going on. We're going to have some other stuff just about the season that was for BC. I'm working on some review stuff for certain plays, certain players. So that'll be coming out in the next few weeks and months.
All right. Thank you for coming on, Mitch. In a moment, I'm going to discuss the basketball team who shocked the world with one of the craziest endings of a game I've ever seen. While hockey, they dominated against Lowell. We'll be back with all that in just a moment. Locked on Boston College, AJ Black. All you everydayers out there know there is one more commitment that Boston College is waiting for that we talked about last week. But hey, if you all saw it, I had a Polly Walnuts. That's my bat signal that there's a second coming out. So make sure you're over on Eagle Insider, and here on Locked On BC. So you have at least 2 recruiting episodes coming up. Hopefully, we'll be getting those news soon. Additionally, over the weekend, basketball. Let's kick it off with some basketball talk here. I have my segment. Let's say something nice about BC basketball. Hey, this whole segment's going to be saying something nice about BC basketball because they beat Florida State in one of the craziest games I've ever seen. I'm talking 15 years plus. I don't think I've seen a win as nuts as what happened on Friday. BC scores 15 points in the last minute, including 5 points in the last, 7 seconds to beat Florida State. So here's how it goes. They're driving down. I think it was Fred Payne drives down with like 8 seconds left. He has his shot blocked, and they're down by 4 at this point. He has a shot block. Chad Venning gets the rebound off of the block and tips it in for 2. They go into press mode. Florida State, in a move that I can only imagine Leonard Hamilton was not happy about, they try to inbound instead of calling timeout, which was stupid. They overthrow the inbound guy right to Chaz Kelly. Like literally it goes right over the guy's head, right to Chaz Kelly, who's deep for 3. And Chaz Kelly, who, look, he's struggled this year. He hasn't been much on offense. He, on like lights out, hits that 3-point shot with 3 seconds left. And BC takes the lead. This was insane because it just looked like this was going to be just any other BC game that they fall apart and lose. Credit to this team for not having those issues and staying tough. Donald Hand had 31 points in this game. Fred Payne had some big points off the bench. We're starting to see Dion Brown that we thought was going to be coming, starting to come here and actually perform at the higher level. So while BC now has 2 ACC wins, which is 2 more than some people thought, me kind of, this was one of those wins that I think no matter what happens this season, this will be one of those games that people are going to talk about because this was crazy. And the fact that it happened to FSU, I find unbelievably hilarious because FSU has been going on and on and on about they're better than the ACC, and they use BC as a point of why they think they're better than us, and that we're not that school. Well, guess what, FSU? You lost to BC in football, and you lost to BC in basketball. Get to the back of the line and take our quarterback with you. Good luck to you. I loved that. I thought the fact that it happened to FSU was delicious. And hey, if we're talking about teams that wanted to get the heck out of the ACC that played BC this weekend. I'm not going to get into it much, but BC women's basketball absolutely clobbered Clemson. Yeah, the other school that wanted to get out. So good weekend for those schools, huh? Additionally, BC hockey. This is not big ACC play here. BC hockey continues their torrid pace, winning 4-0 against number 8 UMass Lowell at Conti Forum on Friday. Ryan Leonard again. I think this is the second time in 2 straight games had a hat trick. This time, I think it was just a pure hat trick. I don't think there was any empty net goals in this one. He had a hat trick, and then they played this game without Jacob Fowler, who had 6 shutouts going into this game. They played with Jan Korik instead, and Jan Korik had a shutout in just his. I don't even know how many games he's played, but I don't think it's been many. So BC, they're playing. UMass Lowell's really good. They're a good team. They're always a good team. BC made them look like the Boston Bruins out there, the way that they're the more current Boston Bruins. Bad analogy, you know what I mean. They didn't look good. So BC gets a big win. They only played one because on Monday they are playing in the Bean Pot. They get the opening round game against Northeastern. The hope, we talked to BC hockey blogger, is that Jacob Fowler will be available. Well, I don't know what he's dealing with, but it sounded like it was day to day. So the hope is he will be back. And the way BC is playing, you got to hope that this will be the first time they win a Bean Pot. And it seems like quite a while. So good weekend all around for BC sports. A bunch of wins. Program looked good. That's where we're at. On tomorrow's show, we may have some recruiting news to talk about. If there's a commitment, we'll talk about it. If there's more news, we will talk about it. Because here, you everydayers know, there's never a shortage of news here on Locked On BC, and I will always have things to talk about. So make sure you hit that like and subscribe button on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts, and make sure to subscribe to Eagle Insider. Follow me on Twitter at AJBlack247 or on Threads, Blue Sky. We're everywhere. Come find us. You'll love the BC content, I promise you. Thank you all, and we'll see you again tomorrow for another episode of Locked On Boston College, your team every day.